I'm Hazel Montgomery, 29, and I sometimes still flinch when I look in mirrors. That's what happens when your own parents spend your childhood telling you you're the ugly disappointment of the family. On my high school graduation day, instead of celebration, my mother took one look at me in my cap and gown and whispered to my father, "Even education can't fix that face." They disowned me that night, claiming I'd embarrass them at college. Yesterday, after 11 years of no contact, I received a wedding invitation from them. Not as a guest, they want me to cater it. Before I dive into this family drama that changed my life forever, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you enjoy stories about family karma. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how this wedding invitation turned into the most satisfying revenge I never planned. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in Westfield, Connecticut, I was the plain duckling in a family of swans. My father, Derek Montgomery, wasn't just handsome, he was the kind of handsome that opened doors. With his perfect smile and tailored suits, he built Montgomery Real Estate into the premier development company in 3 counties. My mother, Barbara, had been Miss Connecticut runner-up in her youth, a fact she mentioned at every possible opportunity. Their wedding photos looked like magazine covers. Then there was my younger sister, Elizabeth Lizzie, to everyone but our mother, who insisted the full name had more elegance. Elizabeth inherited our parents' genes, tall, naturally slim, with our mother's blonde hair and our father's green eyes. And then there was me. I had my grandmother's rounder face, my unknown grandfather's brown eyes, and a build that my mother described as sturdy with a grimace. From my earliest memories, I understood I was different from the rest of my family. Not just different, deficient. Stand behind your sister in this photo. Hazel, my mother would direct at family gatherings. No, further back. Maybe just hold the camera instead? By age 7, I was the designated family photographer. By 9, I had learned to excuse myself from family photos altogether. Our living room walls displayed dozens of framed memories. Elizabeth's dance recitals, my parents' charity galas, family vacations, all without me. The few photos that included me were carefully arranged, so I was partially obscured by someone else. My father's discomfort with my appearance was less overt but equally painful. When introducing me to business associates, he would quickly move the conversation to my academics. "Hazel's quite bright," he'd say, as though offering compensation for my looks. The unspoken message was clear. At least she has something. When I was 12, my parents hosted their annual charity gala at our home. I spent weeks excited about the event, even helping the caterers prepare some of the simpler appetizers. The night of the party, I put on my new dress, a blue one I'd saved my allowance for, and came downstairs. My mother took one look at me, and her smile fell. "Oh, Hazel, why don't you help Mrs. Winters in the kitchen tonight?" "But I wanted to attend the party," I said, my voice small. My father cleared his throat. "Princess, this is an important night for us. Senator Aldridge is coming, and potential investors. Perhaps next year." I spent that night in the kitchen, then in my room, listening to the laughter downstairs. There was never a next year. For subsequent events, my parents arranged for me to stay at friends' houses or, when I was older, to have overnight study sessions at the library. The only person who never seemed to notice or care about my appearance was my grandmother, my father's mother. Grandma June had the same rounder face I did, the same brown eyes. She had been widowed young and raised my father alone, working as a caterer for wealthy families to put him through college. She lived an hour away, but I spent every possible weekend with her. "Appearance is just the wrapping paper," she would tell me while teaching me to make her famous crab cakes. "It's what's inside the package that matters." In her kitchen, I found refuge. Under her guidance, I learned to bake crusty bread, to roast a chicken to juicy perfection, to make pasta from scratch. Cooking became my salvation, the place where I had value. My grandmother kept a collection of recipes passed down through generations, handwritten on yellowed cards. She added her own notes in the margins: "More pepper. Try fresh herbs instead. Good for cold winter nights." She promised they would be mine someday. "You have the gift," she told me. "Your father never had the patience for cooking, But you understand food. At school, I found another ally in Mrs. Reynolds, my home economics teacher. She recognized my talent and let me use the school kitchens during lunch and after classes. When I confided my dream of becoming a chef, she encouraged me. You have exceptional instincts, Hazel. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Between my grandmother's kitchen and Mrs. Reynolds' classroom, I found spaces where I mattered, where my appearance wasn't a liability. I threw myself into academics too, understanding early that in our family, achievements were the currency I needed to buy a minimum of respect. When I was 16, Grandma June died unexpectedly of a stroke. I was devastated. My parents were primarily concerned with the funeral arrangements, nothing too elaborate. Mother wouldn't have wanted a fuss and the inheritance. The money went to my father, of course. The recipe collection, which she had promised to me, mysteriously disappeared after the funeral. Old recipes? I think we threw those out, my mother said when I asked. They were just scraps of paper, Hazel. So unsanitary for a modern kitchen. I later found her showing Elizabeth how to make Grandma's famous chocolate cake, a recipe that had supposedly been discarded. When our eyes met, she simply said, Elizabeth should learn some basic cooking. It impresses potential husbands. I continued to excel academically, graduating as valedictorian of my high school class. My parents attended the graduation ceremony because, as my mother put it would look odd if we weren't there. They sat stone-faced through my speech. Afterward, when other parents were taking photos and celebrating with their graduates, my mother looked at me in my cap and gown, squinting critically. Even education can't fix that face, she whispered to my father. Not quite quietly enough. God, Derek, what will the Prestons think when she shows up at their daughter's wedding next month? She's going to stick out like a sore thumb at Yale in the fall. I pretended not to hear, as I'd done countless times before. But something had shifted inside me. Maybe it was growing up, maybe it was the confidence of my academic success, or maybe it was simply that I was tired of being the family shame. When we got home, still in my graduation gown, I confronted them. I heard what you said, I told my mother. I've heard everything you've both said about me my entire life. What followed would permanently alter the course of my life. I don't know what you're talking about, my mother said, but her eyes darted away from mine. My father loosened his tie, a nervous habit. You called me ugly. At my graduation? You've been calling me ugly my whole life, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Do you think I don't know how much you both wish I looked different? How embarrassed you are by me? My father sighed heavily. Hazel, you're being dramatic. Your mother and I have given you everything, except acceptance. Or love. My mother's face hardened. Love? We've clothed you, fed you, paid for the best education. We've done our duty. And this is the gratitude we get? Barbara, my father warned. But my mother was on a roll now. Years of carefully maintained politeness cracking. No, Derek, I'm tired of pretending. Look at her. Really look at her. She's going to Yale in the fall. People will know she's our daughter, the Montgomery girl. What will our friends think? What will your clients think? So that's it? I asked. You're worried I'll embarrass you at college? We've discussed this, my father said, not denying it. There are options, Hazel. Medical options. We've offered to pay for, to improvements. Plastic surgery. They'd been hinting at it since I turned 16. Small corrections at first, my nose, maybe my chin. Then, bigger suggestions. Liposuction, even though I wasn't overweight, just not runway. Model thin like Elizabeth. Breast augmentation, because I was disproportionate. Each suggestion had been presented as a loving gift, an investment in my future. I'm not getting surgery to make you comfortable with having me as your daughter, I said. My mother threw her hands up. Then I don't know what to tell you. You choose to look like this. You choose to embarrass this family. Barbara, enough, my father cut in, his businessman voice taking over. He turned to me with a practiced sympathetic expression. Hazel, we understand this is a sensitive topic, but you need to understand our position. The Montgomery name carries weight in this community. We have certain standards to maintain. Standards I don't meet because of my face? I asked incredulously. This isn't productive. he sighed. Let's all take some time to cool down and discuss this rationally tomorrow. No, my mother said sharply. No more discussions. I'm done tiptoeing around this. Hazel, you have a choice to make. Either you take the help we're offering to improve your situation, or you need to reconsider your place in this family. There was a terrible silence. What does that mean? I finally asked. My father looked uncomfortable but didn't contradict her. Your mother means that we have certain expectations for all members of this family. Elizabeth understands this. She makes efforts to uphold the Montgomery image. So plastic surgery or what? Disownment? My voice cracked on the last word. My mother's face was stone. If you insist on being difficult about this very reasonable request, then yes. We can't continue to support someone who shows such disregard for this family's reputation. I looked to my father, waiting for him to object, to soften this ultimatum. He adjusted his gold cufflinks. Your Yale tuition is paid for the first semester. That gives you time to reconsider your position. If you decide to be reasonable, we'll continue your education funding. If not, he trailed off. If not, you're on your own, my mother finished. It's entirely your choice, Hazel. I looked across the room to where Elizabeth stood in the doorway, silently watching. She was 18 then, beautiful and perfect, preparing to start at Princeton in the fall. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I thought she might speak up. But she looked away, examining her manicure. I need to think, I said. You have 1 hour, my mother replied. Then I expect your decision. I went upstairs in a daze. 1 hour to decide my future. 1 hour to choose between mutilating myself to please my parents or losing my family and financial support. In my bedroom, I looked around at the space that had been mine for 18 years. The bookshelves filled with academic awards. The small desk where I'd studied my way to valedictorian. The hidden notebook where I'd written down all my grandmother's recipes from memory after my mother lost the originals. When the hour was up, my father knocked on my door. Hazel, time's up. I opened the door. Behind him, my mother and Elizabeth waited in the hallway. I had a single suitcase packed. I see you've made your choice, my mother said, something like satisfaction in her voice. Yes, I said simply. I choose me. My father's jaw tightened. You understand what this means? No more financial support. No college fund. No car. Nothing. I understand. Don't come crying back to us when reality hits, my mother added. This little rebellion might feel good now, but you'll regret it when you're working some minimum wage job because you couldn't finish college. I looked at Elizabeth one last time. Goodbye, Liz. She bit her lip, eyes shining with unshed tears. Hazel, maybe you should just what? Cut open my face to make Mom happy? Starve myself down to your size? No thanks. My father checked his watch. You need to leave now. We have dinner reservations at 7. And that was it. 18 years as a Montgomery ended in an hour. I called Mrs. Reynolds from the bus station. Without hesitation, she said, I'm coming to get you. You can stay with us until you figure things out. The Reynolds family took me in for the summer. I got a job waiting tables at a local diner and another stocking shelves at a supermarket. I called Yale's financial aid office, but without my parents' information, I couldn't complete the FAFSA for student aid. My full-ride dream was dead. By September, I had saved enough for community college tuition and a security deposit on a tiny studio apartment shared with another student. The apartment had roaches and unreliable heat, but it was mine. I studied culinary arts during the day and worked nights and weekends. Every dollar I earned went to tuition, rent, or food. There was nothing left over for luxuries. Depression hit me hard that first year. I'd lost my family, my home, my educational opportunities, all because I refused to be ashamed of my face. Some nights I'd stare at myself in the cracked bathroom mirror, wondering if I should have just gotten the surgeries. Would it have been so terrible to let them reshape me? But deeper than the doubt was a flickering anger that kept me going. I deserved better than conditional love. I started seeing a therapist at the community college's free clinic. Dr. Lynn was a part-time counselor who specialized in family trauma. What your parents did was emotional abuse, she told me in our third session. You're grieving not just the loss of your family, but the loss of the family you deserve to have. Through therapy, I began to understand how deeply my parents' rejection had shaped me. I had internalized their criticism so completely that I couldn't look in a mirror without hearing my mother's voice cataloging my flaws. Dr. Lynn helped me recognize these thought patterns and slowly, painfully, begin to challenge them. After completing my associate degree, I decided I needed a completely fresh start. Chicago was far enough from Connecticut to feel safe, large enough to offer culinary opportunities, and affordable enough for someone with my limited resources. I packed everything I owned into 3 suitcases and took a Greyhound bus west. Chicago was terrifying at first. The pace, the noise, the sheer number of people, all of it overwhelmed me. But it also offered anonymity. No one knew me as the ugly Montgomery girl. No one had any expectations of how I should look or act. I could be just Hazel, culinary school graduate looking for her first real kitchen job. It took 17 applications before I got hired as a prep cook at a mid-range Italian restaurant. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but I was in a real kitchen, cooking real food. The head chef, Marco, was demanding but fair. When he caught me experimenting with one of my grandmother's pasta recipes after hours, he didn't reprimand me for using ingredients without permission. Instead, he tasted the dish, considered it thoughtfully, and said, "Not bad. Needs more acid. Try again tomorrow." 6 months into my Chicago life, I met Thomas. He was a regular at the restaurant, always ordering the special and chatting with the waitstaff. One night, he sent compliments to the kitchen about a soup I had created. Marco, in a rare moment of generosity, sent me out to accept the praise personally. Thomas looked up from his bowl with a warm smile. "This soup is incredible. The depth of flavor is amazing." I stammered my thanks, unused to direct compliments. He asked if I would join him for coffee sometime to discuss cooking. I was suspicious at first. Years of being invisible to men had made me wary, but eventually agreed. Thomas turned out to be exactly what he seemed, a genuinely nice person with an appreciation for good food. He worked as an architect, designing affordable housing units. On our 3rd date, when he tried to take a photo of us together and I automatically angled away from the camera, he noticed. "Do you not like having your picture taken?" he asked gently. Something about his kindness made me tell him everything: my parents, the disownment, my ongoing struggle with self-image. I expected pity or discomfort. Instead, he was angry on my behalf. "That's awful, Hazel. You didn't deserve that. Not any of it." It was the first time someone had been angry for me, rather than at me. It changed something fundamental in how I saw myself. Not as someone who had failed to meet expectations, but as someone who had been wronged. With Thomas's encouragement, I continued therapy, finding a sliding scale clinic I could afford. Slowly, I began rebuilding my sense of self. I wasn't miraculously cured of my insecurities. I still avoided mirrors and cameras, but I stopped actively hating what I saw. Progress came in small moments. Wearing a swimsuit at the lake with Thomas, putting on makeup for enjoyment rather than concealment, gradually accepting compliments without immediately negating them. 3 years after leaving home, I had no contact with my parents and only sporadic, strained calls with Elizabeth. I had changed my phone number twice after my parents' initial attempts to contact me, not with apologies, but with renewed offers to help me fix myself. Elizabeth occasionally tried to mediate, suggesting that if I just apologized for overreacting, everything could go back to normal. She never understood that normal was exactly what I was trying to escape. Chicago winters were brutal, but I was warming to the city. After 2 years at the Italian restaurant, I was promoted to line cook, then to sous chef when the previous one left for a bigger opportunity. My salary improved enough that I could move to a safer neighborhood, though I still had roommates to make the rent affordable. Thomas and I were getting serious, discussing moving in together when his lease ended. The real turning point in my career came when I met Kimberly Park. She was a front-of-house manager at an upscale restaurant where I'd applied for a position. Though I didn't get that job, Kimberly and I connected instantly. She was Korean American, sharp-witted, and had an entrepreneurial spirit that both intimidated and inspired me. "The restaurant industry is brutal," she told me over coffee. "Brutal hours, brutal on your body, brutal on your spirit, unless you're at the top, making the decisions. That takes years," I said, "and connections, and money, or it takes the right partnership." She stirred her latte thoughtfully. "I've been in this industry for 8 years. I know every supplier, every critic, every potential investor in this city. What I don't have is the culinary vision to stand out." I didn't immediately grasp what she was suggesting. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership. Eventually, I've been saving to start my own business. A catering company, not a restaurant. Lower overhead, more flexibility. I've got the business plan, the connections, about half the startup capital. What I need is a chef whose food makes people remember the experience." I was stunned. "You've tasted my food once. 3 times, actually. I ordered delivery from your restaurant, specifically requesting the special when I knew you were cooking. That butternut squash ravioli with brown butter sage sauce, that was the clincher. That sauce had story in it." She was right. The sauce was my grandmother's recipe. Kimberly's proposal was this. She would continue saving while I developed a distinctive culinary style and menu concepts. In a year, we would launch a small catering business, working events on the side while keeping our regular jobs. If things went well, we'd eventually transition to full-time. That year was exhausting but exhilarating. I experimented endlessly, refining my grandmother's recipes and creating new dishes that honored her techniques. Thomas let me use his more spacious kitchen for recipe testing, patiently eating every iteration. Kimberly secured a commercial kitchen we could rent by the hour for prep and brought potential clients to private tastings. When we finally launched Park and Montgomery Catering, we started small birthday parties, office lunches, intimate dinner parties. Our first 3 months were lean. We barely broke even after expenses. There were tearful nights when I was certain we'd made a horrible mistake. Kimberly remained steadfast. "Business is about weathering the valleys until you reach the peaks," she would say. "We just need one big client to notice us." That client turned out to be Julian Torres, a local tech entrepreneur celebrating his 40th birthday. His regular caterer canceled last minute, and his assistant found us through a desperate internet search. We pulled off a dinner for 30 with less than 2 days' notice. Julian was so impressed that he not only paid us a generous bonus, but also recommended us to his extensive network of business associates. Suddenly, we had waitlisted clients. I quit my restaurant job to focus on catering full-time. Kimberly followed 3 months later. We hired staff first, just servers and assistants, then additional cooks as demand grew. We moved from the rented kitchen space to our own small commercial kitchen. Through it all, Thomas was my rock. When I worked 18-hour days, he brought me proper meals and forced me to rest. When I doubted myself, he reminded me how far I'd come. After 4 years together, on a rare vacation to Michigan's Upper Peninsula, he proposed at sunset by Lake Superior. "I don't want a big wedding," I told him immediately. He smiled. I figured. "How about just us, your favorite people, good food that someone else cooks for once?" We married 6 months later in the back garden of Mrs. Reynolds' home in Connecticut. She had remained a constant supporter, sending encouraging cards and occasional care packages during my hardest times. Thomas's parents, his sister and her family, Kimberly, and a handful of friends made up our entire guest list. I did not invite Elizabeth, though I agonized over the decision. Our relationship consisted of birthday calls and occasional text messages, not enough to include her in this intimate moment. The business continued to grow. A local magazine did a feature on Chicago's up-and-coming caterers, with a small photo of Kimberly and me in our kitchen. I worried about the exposure. What if my parents somehow saw it? But the opportunity was too important to pass up. Kimberly, understanding my concerns, positioned herself as the public face of the company. She handled client meetings and media, while I focused on the food and kitchen operations. By my 28th birthday, Park and Montgomery Catering had a solid reputation in Chicago's mid to high-end event circuit. We weren't celebrity chefs, but we were successful, profitable, and respected. Thomas and I bought our first home, a small but charming two-bedroom in a neighborhood we previously couldn't have afforded. For the first time since leaving my parents' house, I felt stable, secure, almost at peace. Then Elizabeth's email arrived. It was a typical Tuesday morning at our office. I was reviewing menus for the weekend's events when my phone chimed with a new email notification. The name in the sender field made my heart stutter. Elizabeth Montgomery. My hand shook so badly I had to put the phone down. It had been years since I'd had any contact with my sister beyond perfunctory birthday messages. I hadn't spoken to my parents at all in 11 years. "You okay?" Kimberly asked, glancing up from her laptop. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," I managed, showing her my phone screen. "Montgomery. Your sister?" I nodded, unable to open the email, paralyzed by a sudden onslaught of memories. "Want me to read it first?" Kimberly offered. I pushed the phone toward her. She opened the email, her expression carefully neutral as she read. "Well," she finally said, "this is interesting. What does she want?" "She says your parents want to hire Park and Montgomery Catering for an event. Apparently, they don't realize it's your company. They think Montgomery is coincidental." A cold feeling spread through my chest. "What event?" Kimberly's eyes met mine. "Elizabeth's wedding. In Connecticut. Next month." I felt the room tilt slightly. My sister was getting married, and my parents wanted to hire me without knowing it was me to cater it. "There's more," Kimberly continued. "The groom is Alexander Preston, as in Preston Hotels. Apparently, your parents have been telling his family that they have another daughter who's a celebrated chef in Chicago. The Prestons heard about us through a business associate who attended an event we catered. They specifically requested us, not knowing the connection." The Prestons. I flashed back to my graduation day. What will the Prestons think when she shows up at their daughter's wedding? I excused myself and hurried to the bathroom, barely making it before my breakfast came back up. After washing my face with cold water, I stared at my reflection. At 29, I looked different from the 18-year-old who'd been disowned. My hair was styled better, I dressed with more confidence, and years of therapy had changed how I carried myself. But underneath, I was still Hazel, the daughter deemed too ugly to be acknowledged. I called Thomas immediately. "My parents want to hire our company. They don't know it's me." His protective instinct flared instantly. "Absolutely not. Tell them to find another caterer. It's for Elizabeth's wedding." A pause. "Oh, she's marrying into the Preston family. Apparently, my parents have been telling them they have a chef daughter they're very proud of." "That's disgusting," Thomas said flatly. "They're taking credit for your success after throwing you out?" By the time I returned to the office, Kimberly had read the entire email. Elizabeth had written paragraphs of explanation, awkward attempts to bridge an 11-year gulf. She was genuinely in love with Alexander. The wedding was important for our parents, who were hoping to impress the Prestons. She knew it was asking a lot, but would I consider taking the job without revealing my identity? "This is bizarre," Kimberly said. "She wants you to secretly cater her wedding while your parents pretend you don't exist?" "While they pretend the successful me doesn't exist," I corrected. "They're happy to claim a fictional chef daughter they can be proud of." I called my therapist, Dr. Winters, requesting an emergency session. "I need to process this before I respond," I explained, when Kimberly raised an eyebrow. That evening, Thomas and I sat on our back porch, drinking wine and discussing options. "You don't owe them anything," he reminded me. "Not your time, not your food, not your presence." "I know." I traced the rim of my wine glass. "But part of me wants to go. To see them. To show them that you succeeded despite them, not because of them. Is that petty?" Thomas took my hand. "It's human. They hurt you deeply, Hazel. It's natural to want some kind of, I don't know, vindication." Dr. Winters had similar thoughts in our session. "There's no wrong answer here," she said. "You can decline, which respects your boundaries. Or you can accept, which might offer closure. The question is, what do you need?" Elizabeth sent 2 more emails that week, each more desperate than the last. In the third one, she finally revealed the truth. Our parents were in financial trouble. The recession had hit my father's real estate business hard. The Prestons were not just socially important, they represented financial salvation through potential business partnerships. "We need this wedding to be perfect," she wrote. "The Prestons are flying in their favorite Chicago chef to assess the caterer. Apparently, she's been to several of your events and raved about your food. If we lose this catering contract, we lose the Preston connection. Dad can't afford that right now." I discussed the situation with Kimberly, who viewed it through a business lens. It's a prestigious wedding with hotel magnates in attendance. From a purely business perspective, it's an incredible opportunity. Then she added, "But you're not just my business partner. You're my friend. If this is too painful, we walk away. Simple as that." After a week of deliberation, I finally called Elizabeth, our first actual conversation in years. "Hazel?" She sounded shocked that I'd called rather than emailed. "Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure." "I need to understand exactly what you're asking," I interrupted. "You want me to cater your wedding while pretending I'm not your sister?" "No, I mean. Yes, technically, but," she sighed, "it's complicated." "Uncomplicate it. Mom and Dad told the Prestons about you. Sort of. They said their older daughter is a successful chef in Chicago. They've been taking credit for supporting your career." The audacity was breathtaking. "And what happens when I show up and they recognize me?" A telling pause. "They might not. It's been 11 years, Hazel. So I'm supposed to serve food to the parents who threw me out, while they pretend to be proud of me, without anyone acknowledging who I really am? When you put it like that, how else would I put it?" Elizabeth's voice quavered. "I know it's asking a lot, but I'm asking anyway. Please, Hazel. This wedding is important." And I wasn't? For 18 years, I wasn't important enough for them to love me as I was? "They made mistakes," Elizabeth said quietly. "Terrible ones. I'm not defending them. But this isn't just about them. It's about me too. And I've missed you." That was the moment my resolve fractured. Not because I forgave my parents, but because beneath the anger and hurt, I had missed my sister too. "I'll think about it," I finally said. "But I'm not making any promises." The formal invitation and contract arrived by courier the next day. The wedding was scheduled for exactly 1 month later at my parents' country club in Connecticut. The contract offered a premium rate far more than our standard fee. Attached was a handwritten note from Elizabeth. "Whatever you decide, thank you for considering it." I read through the contract carefully, noting with bitter amusement that it had been sent to Kimberly Park, executive director, with no mention of the Montgomery half of our company name. I also noticed something else. The Preston family contact was listed as Marissa Preston, the groom's mother, with her direct email and phone number. Curious. I did some internet research on the Prestons. Alexander Preston was the youngest son of hotel magnate Richard Preston. His mother, Marissa, was a renowned food critic and cookbook author. The favorite Chicago chef they were flying in? Sophia Chen, executive chef at Alinea, one of the world's best restaurants. So not only were my parents lying about supporting my career, they were putting me directly in the path of culinary royalty without warning me. The risk of humiliation for all of us was enormous. That night, I made my decision. I would take the job. Not for my parents, not even for Elizabeth, but for myself. For the 18-year-old who'd been thrown away for not being pretty enough. "Are you sure?" Thomas asked, concern etched on his face. "No," I admitted. "But I need to do this anyway." I called Kimberly. "I'm in, but we're doing this my way." The contract was signed with one significant modification. I added a behavior clause specifying that any mistreatment of our staff would result in immediate termination of services with no refund. Kimberly raised an eyebrow at this addition but didn't question it. "So, what's the game plan here?" she asked once the paperwork was finalized. "Are you going to reveal yourself dramatically in the middle of dinner? Jump out of a giant cake?" Despite my nerves, I laughed. "Nothing so theatrical. I'm thinking of something more subtle." Over the next week, Kimberly and I developed what we called Operation Homecoming. The plan was multi-layered. First, I would design a menu incorporating my grandmother's recipes, dishes my parents would recognize, but couldn't publicly reject without seeming culinarily ignorant to the Prestons. Second, Kimberly would handle all preliminary communications and initial on-site meetings, presenting herself as the company head. I would remain in Chicago, ostensibly developing the menu, until 2 days before the wedding. Third, I would arrive with our core team for final preparations, initially staying behind the scenes. We would bring our own trusted staff, rather than using local servers to ensure no one recognized me prematurely. Finally, at the reception, when traditionally the chef comes out to be acknowledged, I would make my appearance not with any dramatic announcement, but simply by being present and letting recognition happen naturally. "It's perfect," Kimberly said. "Professional enough that the Prestons will be impressed, but personal enough to make your point." I began researching my parents' current lives. Through social media and local news websites, I pieced together the past decade. My father's company had weathered the recession but emerged much smaller. My mother still served on charity boards, but was no longer featured prominently in local society pages. Their financial struggles, which Elizabeth had hinted at, appeared to be real. Elizabeth called again, this time with additional information that shifted my perspective on the situation. "There's something I didn't tell you before," she said hesitantly. "Dad's company is worse than struggling, it's nearly bankrupt. The Prestons are potentially investing in a new development, but it's contingent on, well, on them liking our family." "So this wedding is basically a business transaction?" I asked, unsurprised but still disappointed for my sister. "No, I love Alex. This isn't arranged or anything. But the timing is convenient for everyone. Except me. I'm sorry, Hazel. I really am. For everything. For not standing up for you back then. For reaching out now when we need something." Her apology sounded sincere, but it was hard to separate genuine remorse from desperation. "Did you know they've been lying about supporting my career?" I asked. A pause. "Yes. They started about 3 years ago, when Alex first brought me home to meet his parents. Mrs. Preston mentioned loving Chicago's food scene, and Mom just invented this story about her chef daughter. I think she thought it would impress them. Then it snowballed. And you went along with it?" "I didn't know what else to do," Elizabeth admitted. "By the time I realized how serious it was getting, they'd been telling the lie for months. And part of me thought maybe it meant they regretted what happened. That they were proud of you, in their twisted way." I snorted. "They're proud of a fictional daughter who doesn't exist. They have no idea who I really am. Would you want them to? Know the real you, I mean?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I should have had the choice." After the call, I sat at my kitchen table, turning a wooden spoon over in my hands, one of my grandmother's that Mrs. Reynolds had saved for me. The weight of what I was undertaking settled over me. This wasn't just about revenge or vindication. It was about confronting my past so I could fully claim my future. I decided to incorporate not just my grandmother's recipes into the menu, but her stories too. Each dish would come with a small card explaining its significance. From Great-Grandmother Montgomery's summer garden, Grandma June's Sunday supper specialty. These weren't just food items. They were pieces of family history that my parents had tried to erase along with me. Consulting with a lawyer, I made sure our contract protected both my business and my personal boundaries. Thomas helped me practice potential confrontation scenarios, playing the role of my father with eerie accuracy. "What if they deny everything?" he asked during one session. "What if they act like they never disowned you?" "Then I have Elizabeth as a witness," I replied, "and 11 years of silence as evidence. And if they make a scene?" I smiled grimly. "Then they violate the behavior clause, and we pack up, keeping their very substantial deposit." As the wedding date approached, my anxiety increased. I began having nightmares, standing in the kitchen, unable to cook, my parents laughing at me from the dining room, my grandmother's recipes turning to ash in my hands. Dr. Winters helped me develop coping strategies, but the stress was taking a toll. Kimberly returned from her initial site visit with disturbing news. "Your mother is a piece of work," she said bluntly. She tried to negotiate the price down after we'd signed the contract, complained about every suggestion I made, and referred to our staff as the help. Your behavior clause was prescient, and my father, charming but tense, kept checking his watch and taking calls, barely engaged with the menu discussion. She hesitated. They have photos of you in their house. My heart skipped. Recent ones? No. Childhood. But you're cropped out or standing in the back. I wouldn't have noticed except I was looking for them. Elizabeth called again, panicking because our mother was trying to change elements of the menu. She keeps saying the Prestons have sophisticated palates and won't appreciate rustic food. But Alex's mother specifically requested home-style cooking, not fussy restaurant food. My grandmother's recipes are sophisticated, I said, defensive of the menu I'd carefully crafted. Just because they don't come with foam and geometric plating doesn't make them unsophisticated. I know that. But Mom's freaking out about everything. The flowers, the music, my dress. She's trying to control it all. And you're letting her? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. I'm picking my battles, Elizabeth said wearily. The catering is my hill to die on. That's why I'm calling you. Her support for my menu was oddly touching. Perhaps there was still something salvageable in our relationship after all. The final shock came during a video call with Mrs. Preston, arranged to discuss specific dietary restrictions. She was warm and unpretentious, genuinely excited about the menu. I've been to several events you've catered in Chicago, she said. That butternut squash ravioli with the brown butter sage sauce was divine. Thank you, I replied, genuinely pleased by the compliment. Alexander's father and I are so looking forward to meeting you. The Montgomerys speak so highly of your accomplishments. They must be very proud. I managed a tight smile. We'll certainly discuss that at the wedding. After the call, I sat in stunned silence. The depth of my parents' deception was staggering. They hadn't just invented a fictional chef daughter, they'd essentially stolen my actual accomplishments and rewritten history to include themselves in my success story. The night before we left for Connecticut, Thomas held me close. Remember, you don't have to go through with this if it becomes too much. You can walk away at any point. I won't, I said, with more confidence than I felt. I need to see this through, I know. Just remember I'll be there the whole time. We all will. With my team Kimberly, Thomas, and 4 staff members who knew the full situation, I boarded a flight to Connecticut, ready to confront the past I'd spent 11 years trying to escape. The drive from our hotel to my hometown was surreal. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt different. We passed my old high school, the library where I'd spent countless hours studying, the park where my grandmother used to take me for picnics. Each landmark was a memory both familiar and distant. You okay? Thomas asked from the driver's seat, reaching for my hand. Ask me after this is over, I replied, squeezing his fingers. The country club was exactly as I remembered. Manicured lawns, stately white columns, the air of quiet wealth. As a child, I'd only been allowed here for specific events, always with strict instructions to be on your best behavior. Hazel. Now I was returning as a professional, hired to impress the very people who had once found me unworthy. Kimberly went in first to supervise the delivery team and setup. We had agreed I would enter through the back, directly into the kitchen area, minimizing the chance of early encounters with my family. Thomas stayed with me in the car, waiting for Kimberly's all-clear text. They're busy with the florist in the main hall, her message finally read. Kitchen entrance is clear. The country club kitchen was spacious and modern, a chef's dream compared to some of the makeshift spaces we'd worked in over the years. My team was already unpacking, setting up stations with practiced efficiency. They glanced up when I entered, offering encouraging smiles. Chef, Marco, my sous chef, nodded respectfully. Everything's on schedule. I donned my chef's coat, the fabric crisp and reassuring against my skin. This was my domain. Here, I was in control. For 2 hours, we worked without interruption, preparing components that could be made ahead, organizing stations for the next day's service. I was checking a sauce reduction when Kimberly appeared at my elbow. Heads up, mother of the bride approaching. Want to disappear? I considered it, then shook my head. No, I'm not hiding in my own kitchen. Your call. She's coming to inspect progress. I told her the executive chef doesn't appreciate micromanagement. I turned back to my sauce, keeping my back to the door. I heard her before I saw her, the familiar click of heels, the subtle clearing of throat meant to command attention. Miss Park, my mother's voice, unchanged after 11 years. I trust everything is proceeding as discussed? Exactly as planned, Mrs. Montgomery, Kimberly replied smoothly. Would you like to see the appetizer presentation? In a moment. I'd like to speak with your chef about the entree seasoning. The Prestons prefer subtlety. I took a deep breath and turned around. For a moment, my mother continued speaking, not really looking at me, a habit from years of addressing service staff without truly seeing them. Then her eyes focused, her words faltering. The recognition wasn't immediate. She frowned slightly, the expression of someone trying to place a vaguely familiar face. I'd changed in 11 years. My hair was different. I carried myself differently. And most importantly, I was standing in a professional kitchen, wearing a chef's coat with my name embroidered on it, a context in which she'd never imagined me. Then her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. Hazel? Hello, Mother, I said, keeping my voice level. Surprise. Kimberly glanced between us. I'll give you two a moment, she said, retreating tactfully. My mother stood frozen, shock gradually giving way to calculation in her eyes. What are you doing here? I'm catering Elizabeth's wedding, as contracted. But this is Park and Montgomery Catering. Yes, I said. I'm the Montgomery. She glanced around, seeming to notice my staff for the first time. They were pretending not to listen while hearing every word. We need to discuss this privately. I'm rather busy, I replied. Wedding preparations, you understand. Hazel. Her voice dropped to a harsh whisper. Do you have any idea what you're doing? The Prestons will be here tomorrow. Richard Preston is considering a multi-million-dollar investment in your father's business. And what does that have to do with me? Don't play naive. It doesn't suit you. She glanced nervously toward the door. Your father can't know you're here. Not like this. We need to figure out how to handle this situation. Handle it? I raised an eyebrow. The situation is simple. You hired me to cater Elizabeth's wedding. I'm here to do that job. You know very well this complicates things. Only because you've been lying about me. She flinched. We haven't been lying. We've simply presented things in their best light. You told the Prestons you have a successful chef daughter you've supported throughout her career. After disowning me for not being pretty enough to reflect well on the family. That's not best light, Mother. That's fiction. People change, Hazel. Perspectives evolve. Perhaps we handled things imperfectly back then. Imperfectly? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. You threw me out with one suitcase and cut me off completely. You were being stubborn and unreasonable, she countered, reflexively defensive. If you'd just considered the surgeries, and there it is. I turned back to my sauce. Nothing has changed. You still think I was the problem. I didn't come here to argue about the past. Why did you come to the kitchen, Mother? To make sure the help was doing things properly? Before she could respond, the kitchen door swung open again. Elizabeth stood there, still slender and beautiful at 29, though her face showed signs of stress. She froze when she saw us. Mum? Hazel? Oh God. Your sister is trying to ruin your wedding, my mother said immediately. Elizabeth looked between us, then surprised me by saying, No, she's not. She's doing her job, the job we hired her to do. She turned to our mother. Mom, please go back to the florist. I need to speak with Hazel. For a moment, I thought my mother would refuse. Then, with a tense nod, she left, the click of her heels sharp with anger. When the door closed behind her, Elizabeth let out a long breath. Well, that wasn't how I pictured your reunion. Did you picture a teary reconciliation? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. No. She came further into the kitchen, glancing apologetically at my staff. Can we talk? Somewhere private? I nodded to Marco. Take over here. I'll be back in 15. Elizabeth led me to a small sitting room off the main corridor. As soon as the door closed behind us, she turned to me. I'm sorry, Hazel, for everything. For not standing up for you back then. For waiting 11 years to apologize. For bringing you into this mess now. The apology caught me off guard. In all my imagined scenarios, I hadn't prepared for sincerity. Why didn't you ever reach out? I asked. Really reach out, not just birthday texts. She sank into an armchair. At first, I was still living at home. They monitored everything, my calls, my emails. By the time I was at college, so much time had passed. I was a coward. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. And I was complicit. I benefited from being the good daughter, the pretty one, the one who didn't make waves. And now? Now I'm 30 years old and still letting them control aspects of my life. But I love Alex, Hazel. This wedding would be happening regardless of Dad's business situation. I believed her. Despite everything, Elizabeth had never been cruel, just passive a bystander to cruelty. Tell me about them, I said. Our parents. How bad is it really? She sighed. Dad overextended during the boom years. When the crash came, he was leveraged to the hilt. They had to sell the vacation house, Mom's jewelry. They remortgaged the main house. They've been keeping up appearances, but it's all facade. And the Prestons are their salvation? Richard Preston wants to develop luxury hotels in 3 locations where Dad owns prime land. It would solve everything. But the Prestons are old money particular about who they do business with. The right connections, the right family background. Mom's been spinning stories about our perfect family to impress them, including inventing a chef daughter they're proud of. Elizabeth winced. It started as a small lie. Then Mrs. Preston mentioned loving Chicago's food scene, and suddenly, Mom was talking about her talented daughter with a successful catering business there. After that, they couldn't walk it back. So what happens tomorrow, Elizabeth? What's your plan when they realize I'm the daughter they disowned, not the one they've been bragging about? I don't know, she admitted. I honestly thought. I hoped that seeing each other might lead to some kind of reconciliation. 11 years of silence. And you thought a surprise reunion at your wedding would fix everything? She looked away. It sounds naive when you put it like that. It is naive. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. It was the question I'd been asking myself since agreeing to this job. In my darkest moments, I'd imagined elaborate public humiliations, exposing my parents' cruelty and lies before all their friends. But facing Elizabeth's genuine distress, those fantasies felt hollow. My job, I finally said. I'm going to cater this wedding exactly as contracted. I'm going to serve beautiful food that honors our grandmother's memory. I'm not going to make a scene. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. I'm not doing it for them, I clarified. I'm doing it for my business reputation. And maybe a little for you, she nodded, understanding the boundaries I was establishing. Mom will come around. She has to. There's no other option now. And Dad? Elizabeth's expression faltered. He'll be difficult. He never acknowledges when he's wrong. Some things never change, I said, standing up. I need to get back to work. We'll see what tomorrow brings. As I returned to the kitchen, I passed a wall of family photos displayed for the wedding. I paused, scanning the carefully curated images. There I was in a few childhood photos, always partially obscured or at the edge of the frame. In the more recent ones, I was absent entirely. 11 years erased, except for the fictional chef daughter they'd created to impress the Prestons. Tomorrow would change everything. One way or another. Wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the kind of early summer day that photographers dream about. My team arrived at the venue at dawn, long before the ceremony would begin. The kitchen was a controlled chaos of preparation, with each station executing their tasks with precision. Thomas arrived mid-morning, handsome in a suit, as my designated +1 for the reception. How are you holding up? He asked, finding me in a quiet corner checking a plating design. Strangely calm, I replied. Like the stillness before a storm. He kissed my forehead. Your food looks amazing. Whatever happens with your family, you've already won. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m., with cocktails and appetizers immediately following, and dinner at 6. My team was responsible for both the cocktail hour and the main reception. As guests began arriving for the ceremony, we put final touches on the appetizer stations and trays. Kimberly, elegant in a black dress that let her blend with the service staff when needed, coordinated with the venue manager. "The Prestons have arrived," she informed me, returning briefly to the kitchen. "They're asking when they can meet the chef." After the first course is served, I replied, as we'd planned, "Let them enjoy the appetizers first." The ceremony proceeded without incident. From the kitchen windows, I caught glimpses of Elizabeth in her wedding gown, looking radiant. My parents sat in the front row, the perfect image of proud family. My father distinguished in his tuxedo, my mother elegant in pale blue. The cocktail hour began, and our servers circulated with trays of appetizers, all elevated versions of my grandmother's recipes. Mini crab cakes with her special remoulade, tiny pastry cups filled with her famous wild mushroom ragu, bite-sized versions of her summer vegetable tarts. Through the service doors, I watched guests exclaiming over the food. Mrs. Preston was particularly enthusiastic, stopping servers to ask questions about ingredients. My father remained by the bar, networking with determination, occasionally glancing nervously at the kitchen doors. My mother fluttered between guest clusters, her social smile firmly in place. Neither approached the kitchen. Elizabeth had clearly told them I was here. They were avoiding a confrontation, at least until after the Preston contract was secured. Dinner service began precisely on schedule. The first course, my grandmother's tomato and roasted red pepper soup, served with tiny grilled cheese croutons, went out flawlessly. As the guests finished their soup, Kimberly approached the head table to speak with the Prestons. "It's time," she told me, returning to the kitchen. "Mrs. Preston specifically requested to meet you before the main course is served." I checked my appearance, chef's whites immaculate, hair neatly secured, the Montgomery family necklace my grandmother had given me visible at my throat. I took a deep breath and nodded to Thomas, who squeezed my hand in support. "You've got this," Kimberly said. "They're going to love you." I walked through the service doors into the reception hall. The room was beautifully decorated, soft lighting, creating a romantic atmosphere. At the head table sat the bride and groom, their parents, and key members of the wedding party. My parents' backs were to me as I approached. Elizabeth saw me first, her expression a complex mix of anxiety and hope. Then Mrs. Preston looked up with a warm smile. "Ah, here's the chef now," she exclaimed. "We've been so looking forward to meeting you." My mother turned first, her wine glass clutched a bit too tightly, her social smile frozen in place. My father was mid-conversation with Mr. Preston, but went silent when he saw me. "Mr. and Mrs. Preston," I said, keeping my voice professional and warm. "I'm Hazel Montgomery, executive chef and co-owner of Park and Montgomery Catering. I'm delighted you're enjoying the menu." Mrs. Preston rose to shake my hand. "My dear, the appetizers were divine. That mushroom ragu especially, I simply must have the recipe." "Family secret, I'm afraid," I replied with a genuine smile. My grandmother would haunt me if I shared it outside the Montgomery family. The crystal wine glass in my mother's hand shattered, sending shards across the white tablecloth and spattering her pale blue dress with red wine. The sudden noise drew all eyes to her. "Barbara!" my father exclaimed, half rising. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said tightly, blotting at her dress with a napkin. "Just clumsy. Please continue." Mrs. Preston turned to my parents with a puzzled expression. "Montgomery, then you must be related to our hosts?" There it was, the moment of truth. "Yes," I said simply. "Derek and Barbara are my parents." Mr. Preston looked between us, confusion evident. "Your parents?" But I thought. He turned to my father. "Derek, you mentioned your daughter was getting married today." "Elizabeth is getting married today," I clarified, gesturing to the bride. "I'm the older daughter, Hazel." Understanding dawned on Mrs. Preston's face, followed quickly by delight. "Oh, how wonderful. You catering your own sister's wedding, what a special family touch." She turned to my mother. "Barbara, you didn't mention this." What a lovely surprise. My mother's face was a rigid mask. Yes, quite a surprise. "We wanted to keep it as a special revelation for the dinner," my father interjected smoothly, recovering his composure. Hazel is so modest about her accomplishments. Mrs. Preston turned back to me, clearly enchanted by the perceived family collaboration. Well, I think it's marvelous. And these recipes? You mentioned their family secrets? Yes, I said, seizing the opening. My grandmother's recipes, primarily. Each dish on tonight's menu has special significance in our family history. How fascinating. Barbara, you must be so proud of how Hazel has preserved your family culinary traditions. My mother's smile was brittle. Indeed. The main course will be served shortly, I continued. Grandmother June's braised short ribs with her special herb demi-glace. It was her signature dish for family celebrations. June? Mr. Preston perked up. Was that your mother, Derek? My father nodded stiffly. Yes, my mother. I remember her. Didn't she used to cater events back in the day? Wonderful cook. Yes, I confirmed. She taught me everything I know about cooking. She always believed food was how our family showed love. The pointed comment hung in the air between me and my parents. Elizabeth, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, suddenly spoke up. Hazel recreated all of Grandma's recipes from memory after Mom accidentally threw out the original recipe cards after Grandma died. My mother's eyes flashed a warning at Elizabeth, who ignored it. What a shame to lose family recipes, Mrs. Preston said. But how talented you must be, Hazel, to recreate them from memory. I had a lot of practice making them growing up, I replied. Cooking was my refuge. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of servers with the main course. I should return to the kitchen, I said. Please enjoy your dinner. I'll check back after dessert is served. As I turned to leave, Mr. Preston called after me. Miss Montgomery Hazel, your parents have been telling us how proud they are of your culinary career. Now we understand why. Remarkable talent. I paused, then turned back with a carefully neutral expression. Have they? How interesting. We haven't actually spoken in 11 years, since they disowned me after high school graduation. A stunned silence fell over the table. Mrs. Preston's mouth actually dropped open. Mr. Preston looked from me to my father, whose face had gone rigid with controlled fury. There must be some misunderstanding, my father said, his businessman voice taking over. Hazel has always had a flair for the dramatic. No misunderstanding, I replied calmly. You disowned me when I refused to get plastic surgery to meet your appearance standards for the family. Mom said, and I quote, even education can't fix that face. You gave me an hour to pack a suitcase and leave. That's absurd, my mother hissed. Richard, Marissa, I assure you, it's true, Elizabeth interrupted, her voice quavering but determined. I was there. They threw her out and cut her off completely. Everything she's accomplished, she's done without a penny of family support. The Prestons looked horrified. Mrs. Preston's hand had gone to her throat, but you've spoken so often of visiting her in Chicago, of supporting her business. They've never set foot in my restaurant, I said. They didn't even know I was the Montgomery in Park and Montgomery until yesterday. I think, Mr. Preston said carefully, that perhaps we should continue this discussion after the reception. This is, after all, a wedding celebration. Absolutely, I agreed. My professional obligation is to ensure all guests enjoy a wonderful meal, regardless of family drama. If you'll excuse me, I returned to the kitchen, legs shaking but spine straight. Thomas met me at the door, concern written on his face. I heard glass breaking. What happened? Mom had a little accident with her wine glass when she saw me. Then I might have mentioned the whole disownment thing to the Prestons. His eyes widened. You didn't. I did. Very calmly and professionally. Kimberly joined us. Based on what I just overheard from the servers, you dropped quite a bomb out there. The truth isn't a bomb, I replied. It's just the truth. For the next hour, we focused on service. The main course was enthusiastically received. My father remained at the head table, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with Mr. Preston. My mother had disappeared, presumably to change her wine-stained dress. Elizabeth caught me as I was supervising dessert plating. That wasn't how I pictured this going, she said, a hint of hysteria in her laugh. "I'm sorry if I ruined your wedding," I said, and meant it, but I couldn't keep playing along with their fiction. To my surprise, she hugged me. "You didn't ruin anything. It's actually liberating. I've been so tired of all the pretense. What's happening with the Prestons?" Mrs. Preston is horrified by Mom and Dad's behavior. Mr. Preston is reconsidering the partnership terms. She didn't look as devastated by this news as I might have expected. "But they love you and your food. Mrs. Preston wants to discuss having you cater events at their Chicago hotel." I hadn't anticipated this outcome. Really? Really. They respect authenticity and talent. And they absolutely despise social climbers who manufacture fake family narratives. She squeezed my arm. "I have to get back, but thank you. For coming, for cooking, for telling the truth." Dessert was served without further incident, my grandmother's blackberry cobbler, updated with a vanilla bean creme anglaise. As coffee was being poured, I made a final round of the tables to ensure everything had met expectations. The Prestons waved me over again. "Miss Montgomery," Mr. Preston said formally, "I want to thank you for an exceptional meal. Your grandmother would be proud." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched. "We'd like to discuss some business opportunities in Chicago when you have time," Mrs. Preston added. "Our hotel there could use a distinctive catering option for events." I handed her my business card. "I'd be delighted to discuss possibilities." My parents were noticeably absent from the head table. Elizabeth whispered that they had retreated to handle a personal matter. Translation: they were hiding in embarrassment. As the reception wound down, I supervised cleanup and packing. We had just finished loading the vans when my father appeared at the kitchen door. "Hazel." A word. Thomas and Kimberly both moved protectively closer to me. "It's okay," I told them. "I'll meet you at the van in 5 minutes." When they reluctantly left, my father stepped fully into the kitchen. He had aged in the past 11 years, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth. But his posture was still rigidly upright, his expression controlled. "That was a calculated performance," he said, his voice cold. "Designed for maximum damage." "It was the truth," I replied simply. "Something this family has never been comfortable with. You've potentially cost me millions of dollars. And you cost me a family. I'd say we're still not even." He studied me with narrowed eyes. "You've changed." "Yes. I grew up without you." "What do you want, Hazel? Money? Is that what this is about? Revenge?" I shook my head, suddenly tired. "I don't want anything from you. I never did. All I ever wanted was to be accepted as I was." "Then why come back now? Why take this job?" "Because I'm good at what I do. Because Elizabeth asked me. And because maybe I needed to see you both again to finally close this chapter." He was silent for a long moment. "Your mother won't forgive this humiliation." I stopped needing her forgiveness a long time ago. We stood looking at each other across the kitchen, 11 years of absence between us. There would be no tearful reconciliation, no healing embrace. Some wounds cut too deep, some bridges burned too thoroughly. "Goodbye, Dad," I said finally. "Congratulations on Elizabeth's wedding." I walked past him out of the kitchen, not looking back. Thomas was waiting by the van, arms open. I stepped into his embrace, feeling the weight of the past finally beginning to lift from my shoulders. 1 week after the wedding confrontation, Thomas and I sat on the patio of our Chicago home, drinking morning coffee and watching the neighborhood come to life. The summer air was warm, the sky clear blue. "Any regrets?" Thomas asked, refilling my cup. I considered the question carefully. The week since the wedding had been a whirlwind of emotions and unexpected developments. "No," I finally said, "not about telling the truth. I regret that it happened at Elizabeth's wedding, but keeping their secret would have been betraying myself." The fallout had been substantial, but not what I'd anticipated. Elizabeth had called the day after the wedding, surprisingly upbeat. "The Prestons are still investing with Dad," she reported, "but with modified terms that give them more control. And they've made it clear they want a relationship with you going forward." "What about Mom and Dad?" "Dad's adapting. He's a businessman first. He'll do whatever keeps the deal alive. Mom's mortified. She won't leave the house. But that's her problem, not yours. Our business had experienced an unexpected boom. Word had somehow spread about the wedding drama, probably through the catering staff, and we'd received an influx of new inquiries. People apparently loved the idea of hiring a chef with a dramatic backstory. Kimberly was delighted by the publicity, even as she fielded calls from local food bloggers seeking interviews. Most surprising was the email from Mrs. Preston, waiting in my inbox when we returned to Chicago. She'd requested a meeting to discuss having Park and Montgomery Catering handle events at the Preston Chicago Hotel. Your food was exceptional, and your integrity even more so, she wrote. Both qualities we value highly in business partners. So what happens now? Thomas asked, bringing me back to the present moment. With your family, I mean. Elizabeth and I are talking regularly, I said. She's coming to visit next month. I think we might actually build a real sister relationship now that she's not caught between me and our parents. And your parents? I sighed. I don't know. I don't think reconciliation is possible, at least not with my mother. Maybe someday my father will reach out, once his pride recovers. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not reaching out first. That afternoon, I received another surprising email. A local newspaper wanted to do a feature on female entrepreneurs in the Chicago food scene, with a focus on Park and Montgomery Catering. Apparently Mrs. Preston had recommended us. You should do it, Thomas encouraged. Your story deserves to be told. I was hesitant at first. I'd spent years avoiding publicity specifically to stay under my parents' radar. But that was no longer necessary. The truth was out. I had nothing to hide. The reporter who interviewed me was thoughtful and respectful. She didn't sensationalize the family drama, but focused instead on the resilience it had taken to build a successful business without family support or connections. The resulting article, titled From Family Kitchen to Culinary Success, painted a portrait of determination that resonated with readers. Our booking calendar filled for months in advance. 2 weeks after the article was published, I received a small package with a Connecticut postmark. Inside was a worn, leather-bound book with no note. I recognized it immediately, my grandmother's recipe collection, the one my mother had claimed to have thrown away. The pages were yellowed, the handwriting familiar and dear. My grandmother's notes in the margins brought tears to my eyes. Hazel loves this with extra cinnamon. Perfect for Hazel's birthday. Taught Hazel to make this, she has the touch. Elizabeth confirmed she had sent it. I found it in Mom's hope chest years ago. I should have given it to you then, but, well, better late than never. In my next therapy session with Dr. Winters, I brought the recipe book to show her. This feels like closure somehow, I said. Having this piece of my grandmother back. It's a physical link to the positive parts of your past, she agreed. A reminder that not all family connections were harmful. I've been thinking about family a lot, I admitted. What it means, how it shapes us. And what conclusions have you reached? That blood doesn't guarantee love or acceptance. That family can be chosen. That Thomas and Kimberly and my team are more family to me than the people who raised me. She smiled. That's a powerful realization. There's something else, I added hesitantly. Thomas and I have been talking about starting a family of our own. Maybe adopting. And how do you feel about that possibility? Terrified, I admitted. What if I don't know how to love a child properly? What if I carry forward the damage my parents caused? The fact that you're asking these questions already puts you miles ahead, Dr. Winters said gently. Breaking generational patterns starts with awareness. That evening, Thomas and I visited my grandmother's grave. I hadn't been back since her funeral, but the groundskeeper had kept it well maintained. We placed fresh flowers, and I set a small jar of homemade blackberry jam, her recipe, beside the headstone. I wish you could have met her, I told Thomas. She would have loved you. I feel like I know her through your stories and her food, he replied, holding my hand. And I see her in you, your resilience, your talent, your kindness, despite everything. Back home, I received a letter from Mrs. Reynolds, my high school teacher who had taken me in that first terrible night. She had attended the wedding as Elizabeth's guest, but kept her distance, not wanting to complicate an already tense situation. Her letter was full of pride and encouragement. I always knew you would find your way, she wrote. Your path hasn't been easy, but you've walked it with grace and courage. Your grandmother would be so proud of the woman you've become. Looking in the mirror that night, I studied my reflection with new eyes. The face that had been deemed unworthy was now the face of a successful chef, a loving partner, a survivor. The ugly features my mother had wanted surgically altered were the same features that connected me to my grandmother, the woman who had shown me what unconditional love felt like. For the first time in memory, I smiled at my reflection without reservation. Not because I suddenly found myself beautiful by conventional standards, but because I finally saw the whole person, not just the face, but the strength, the talent, the journey. The mirror reflected back not just how I looked, but who I had become. And that person was worthy of love, exactly as she was. I would always carry the scars of my parents' rejection. They had shaped me, but they no longer defined me. My story wasn't about being the ugly duckling, or even about transforming into a swan. It was about finding my own definition of beauty and worth, outside of anyone else's narrow standards. 11 years after being disowned for my appearance, I had found something far more valuable than beauty or family connection. I had found myself. I'd love to hear from you all about moments when family karma or justice was served in your own lives. Did you ever have to stand up to family members who treated you unfairly? How did it change your relationship with them or your relationship with yourself? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and self-discovery. Remember, your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see it.